my name is Mark Myers and welcome to Myers Counseling Group Podcast. We offer the latest information on mental health and substance misuse concerns. For more information, additional resources, and previous podcasts, visit us at myerscounseling.com. To see the latest information about our book, Falling Trees, Colorblind Scientists, and Addiction, go to fallingtreesbook.com. Hello. Today we'd like to welcome Dr. Patrick McGrath, Head of the Clinical Services for NOCD. Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. Could you explain your position, what you do, and as well as your credentials?
Of course. So I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I've been treating anxiety disorders and OCD, post-traumatic stress disorder, for over 20 years now. My current position as head of clinical services for NOCD is to work on developing our teletherapy network that we have. NOCD is an app that's free download for people who have obsessive compulsive disorder. We've got a large community on there, in fact, the largest OCD community in the world. And there's therapy tools on there, and now we are reaching out into the teletherapy area as well. I was at Amita Health for 14 years, developed their intensive outpatient program, partial hospitalization program, as well as their residential treatment center for obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. I've got a couple of books out. One's called Don't Try Harder, Try Different. The other is the OCD Answer book. I'm on the Scientific and Clinical Advisory Board for the OCD Foundation and president of OCD Midwest and Anxiety Centers in Illinois as well, too.
Oh, excellent. Could you explain, today we're going to be talking about hoarding in particular.
Sure.
I'm going to ask you to start just a very general question to start with is, can you explain about that population, how one would diagnose that, what are the criteria? Just giving our audience a brief overview of that population.
Sure. So a couple of changes have occurred recently, which are kind of interesting in the world of hoarding. Originally, up and through the DSM-4 TR, hoarding was listed under specifically as a subset of obsessive compulsive disorder. Now in DSM-5, we moved hoarding out specifically as being OCD to being a related disorder to obsessive compulsive disorder. And it turns out actually to be a lot better that way because people with OCD would typically come in and say that they wanted some help with their OCD versus people who had hoarding would typically say, please leave me alone and go away. So they typically weren't wanting a lot of help. So it's better now to kind of have it as a related disorder and as its own disorder. So a few things as we look through the DSM, where you've got a persistent difficulty in getting rid of things. So, and their value doesn't have to be taken into account for that. So old receipts or pieces of scrap paper. I once even watched on one of the television shows on hoarding. I did a few of those myself. I was on Hoarding Buried Alive. But a woman was struggling with throwing out a Frisbee that was cracked because she thought, well, I could donate it to a local grade school and then they could cut it up into little pieces, glue it on paper, and it would look like a mosaic or a stained glass window or something like that. So they can see amazing value in things that no one else sees value in whatsoever. There's a big need for people to save items, and there's a lot of distress that's associated when discarding those items. And that difficulty then in discarding things can really result in tons of accumulation. Living areas can become amazingly cluttered for people, and a lot of times it's only because third parties are coming in that some of this stuff starts to get cleared out. This does cause distress or impairment, and what I've seen is a lot less distress in people's lives, but a lot more impairment in people's lives. Hoarders typically won't talk about being distressed about it, and many times they'll say to me, oh, I just need a day or two and I'll have everything cleaned up out of here. So it's almost as if they can't see everything that's in the hole that's there. And we don't attribute this to another disorder, and it's not better explained by symptoms of another disorder or medical condition or something of that nature.
You had mentioned stress versus impairment. Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
would be like you can't use your home, that you have to shower outside because your pipes leak, and yet no one can get in to the house to fix your pipes because there's too much stuff in there. So you see an interference that the hoarding has upon your life big time because of the fact that there's so much stuff in the home. I knew someone once who moved out of her father's home because their furnace had run out, and it was the middle of winter, and it was going to take about 2 weeks to move all of the stuff out of the way to get to the furnace, just to have somebody take a look at it. And they had to move into an apartment to live there just so they would have heat. Right? So there's a lot of impairment in that situation, but the hoarder themselves, not very stressed about it. He continued to live in the home and just put space heaters in, which is dangerous in hoarding homes, by the way, as well, too, and put on more jackets and things like that, and just lived like that.
So I work a lot with the substance abuse population, and at some point we talk about a thought process that goes on. Gee, I could have one more drink. This is a special occasion. Why not? I mean, do you see any similarities with that? That the hoarder may be doing their own self-talk to allow these actions to continue?
Yeah, there's a lot of rationalizations of things about why something is good to hold on to. If I get rid of that, then I'll lose the meaning that's associated with that. So, that shirt is a moldy mess and you can't really see what's on it. That is the shirt that my son wore the first day of first grade. And if I were to get rid of the shirt, then I would be throwing away the memory of him going to first grade. So it's better if I just hold on to it and keep it with me.
Now, are these a group of individuals where, and I'm going to kind of dovetail on this stress versus impairment, is this a group of individuals that oftentimes willingly or unwillingly come into treatment?
Unwillingly is more often than willingly. Hoarders typically don't come to see me. Their family brings them in to see me if I've seen one. So it's a far rarer occurrence that the hoarder will initiate the beginnings of treatment, and it's more often that there's been some kind of family intervention or something that's gone on, and now there's an invention. There's some kind of work with the hoarding that's going on in the family.
So that would be the level of impairment doesn't always match the motivation into coming into therapy.
Oh no, not at all. There are stories in Chicago of one woman who died in the suburbs, and the fire department just cut a hole in the roof and pulled her body out that way because it was easier than it was to move everything out of the home.
Wow, that's remarkable. And I'm assuming at some point it's either family, health departments, neighbors that usually draw attention to the pathology that's continuing.
Correct. And one thing that falls under the rubric of OCD Midwest, which is the local affiliate of the International OCD Foundation, is the Chicago Hoarding Task Force. And the Chicagoland Hoarding Task Force is led by Dr. Greg Chasson. He's at Illinois Institute of Technology, and he does a lot of work in the hoarding area, really out to educate individuals who are in the fire department or police departments and community organizations about the issues and problems of hoarding.
What would be the treatment approach? How do you begin to address that?
Yeah, I personally like to utilize the 4-box method if I can. So I have a keep box, I have a donate box, I have a recycle box, and then a toss box. And you have to fill all 4 boxes before you get 4 new boxes. So many people will fill the safe box and say, hey, I need a new safe box. And say, nope. First you must also fill the donate, recycle, and throw out box as well, too. And then it's really imperative on anyone who's working with the person who has hoarding to take those things that are to be recycled and donated and thrown out away from the property. Otherwise, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but there's gnomes that about 3 a.m. go out to the curb and just bring everything back in the house. And it's an amazing phenomenon that happens in hoarding homes, where all of these things just magically return somehow back in the home if they are just left out on the curb. So it is best to make sure that everything goes away.
Wow. Okay. So that's a big temptation for them. If it's within sight, that there's a likelihood that they may bring it back into the house.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Now, is it only? Is there a particular items that are usually? Is there a sentimental value to it? I mean, is it couches? Is it paper? Is it even animals? I've questioned some clients. Oh, all of them.
All of it. A 1972 Burger King receipt is a Picasso. I mean, it has value, because what if one day I'm in a conversation and someone says, "What did a Whopper cost in 1972?" I'm going to be able to find that. It might take 3 weeks, but I'm going to be able to find that and say, "Well, here it was 78 cents for a Whopper in 1972."
How about animals? Do people hoard animals?
Absolutely, and that can be a very significant problem, and that's one where the neighbors typically get involved too, because of just either the smells that come from the home or all the strays that start hanging around the properties and things. And as odd as it sounds, because people with hoarding of animals feed the animals typically so well, you might actually also get an increase in vermin in the area too, because the cats and the dogs are so well fed that they just don't even really hunt anymore. So it's actually a safe place for mice and rats and things to be around.
How would one? You had talked about some of the criteria with it. Is it possible that people, that there's kind of you have levels of severity, I guess, is what I would be looking for, with this. I haven't looked at the criteria. I don't work with that population, but I was just curious. I know with the substance abuse, with others, we have mild, moderate, and severe. Do you have those types of criterias in working with hoarding?
We look more at like insight. What's their level of insight on what the hoarding is at? Is it good or fair? Is it poor? Is it kind of absent or delusional, that they're convinced that these behaviors are not problematic at all whatsoever? We'll look at it with excessive acquisition, where they do keep acquiring more and more things and filling the house more and more without getting rid of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, if you go online, you can even look up hoarding rating scale, and there's a series of 9 pictures of different rooms in people's homes, and you can take a look at those pictures and see various degrees that hoarding might occur. And when it gets above number 4, then we're typically looking at hoarding. But it can go up to 9, where the room is basically unusable because there's just so many things. Even the stove in the kitchen is just buried in papers and boxes and things, and you can't even get to it to turn it on.
So what would your treatment approach? I know we touched on this a few minutes ago, but what would you, and you mentioned the 4 boxes, is a treatment approach usually coming to their house? Or is that something that could be done in a therapist's office?
Well, it is usually going to their home from a point of view of vermin or bugs. Therapists probably don't want to have a lot of boxes of things coming in their office, because you just don't know what's in the home.
Good point.
Right? So, and this changed years ago. Before bed bugs really popped back, I would have no qualms about having somebody bring a box of stuff in, and we'd go through and we'd take a look. And then as bed bugs started to return and some other things, it was just, when I was working at the hospital, we just had to make the decision and the call that, listen, we can't have you bring boxes of things here into the hospital anymore, because if there was some kind of infestation that would occur, you could see how it could shut down a hospital, right? It could be a huge PR issue or anything like that. So it is more about going to the person's home and working with them there, and likely needing a team to do this. So this is a good project for if students need some practicums or help as well, that they can also become involved in some of these types of situations. And I let therapists know that it is absolutely okay for them to do the things that they feel they need to do in order to stay safe. So if they want to wear a mask because of all the dust that's in the homes, I have even at times put rubber bands around the bottoms of my pants so that I don't have something crawl up my leg. You have to do what feels comfortable for you in the situation. And that's what I just explained to the patients that I've worked with, that, for my own breathing sake or the smell of this home has a lot of ammonia in it due to the 50 cats that were living here and have soaked their urine basically into the floorboards and into the studs and everything. That ammonia smell is just so amazingly powerful that for my breathing sake and health, I'm going to wear a mask.
And it seems like this type of therapy would lend itself to more of a physical, direction on your part. You're directly interacting. You're following up. You're in their scene of action. There, it seems that where traditionally counseling, people come in, we talk. We're not as much hands-on or have the ability to be hands-on as this type of treatment.
Right. So it does involve a therapist who's willing to get out of their office and to actually be kind of literally in the grunge,
right?
Shall we say?
Right.
Who's digging into stuff with people and who's figured out a way to kind of schedule their day where it is okay for them to be out of the office for a while, to be in someone's home.
Mm-hmm. What is the well? Actually, before I'm going to interrupt myself here, is there medication that's usually as part of the therapy?
There can be, similar to what we do with OCD and various things, but the reality being that it appears the behavioral piece is really the most important part of treating hoarding.
Do you work with families?
You kind of have to, right?
That's what I thought.
It's just a thing that almost every time I've done some of the hoarding work, I've had families who are involved, and theirs were always involved on the television shows too. When I was shooting those, that the family was a part of the work that we were doing. That not only does the family have to learn how to help, but they also have to kind of figure out how to stand up to the hoarder in a way too, because many times that hoarding has taken over the entire household at the expense of other family members being able to even live in the home too. I remember one home I was in, there were 3 places to sit: the toilet, a desk chair, and the bed, and that was it. Everything else was covered. So, and there were 2 people living in that home, so that the person who wasn't hoarding was limited to only sitting in those 3 places unless he wanted to sit outside.
So the family involvement may actually be putting the pressure or making sure that there's follow through and continued follow through. So I could understand that's that the family part is going to be a big part of their treatment.
Yeah, and that's where working with a professional organizer can be very helpful as well too, because they can continue the work with the family post having the therapeutic intervention to make sure that those individuals are really maintaining their gains and continuing to learn how to better organize their lives.
Now, I have seen, readily admitted that I haven't watched from beginning to end, but I have caught snippets of the television programs about hoarding, and they do show. And I'm assuming if you've been a part of it, there's validity to that. Is how difficult and how actually painful it could be for the hoarders to be giving up some of this, even at great cost, for them to be able to give up the things that they've been holding on to and hoarding. I mean, could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, there's numerous reasons. Number one, they may believe, hey, I paid money for that, so it's mine, so you can't take it away.
Right.
Number two, it could be that thing is associated with a memory, so if I lose that thing, I'm losing the memory of that thing, and And that's really painful because I like to have that tactile kind of thing to remind me of stuff. Some people just really enjoy holding something. They don't want to virtually look at something online. They actually want to hold that thing in their hands. So to have that thing go away is not as good as a picture of that thing, because I like to actually just have that thing with me, So, there's just tons of different reasons. Animals could be, I don't feel that I'm as loved by humans as I am by the animals that I have in my home. And animals don't get angry at me and they don't talk back. They just appreciate that I bring them food and that I give them shelter. And so look at how lovely it is to have all of these animals around. They're wonderful. And things become more important than people and relationships in hoarding because things are safe, right? Sometimes hoarding is literally building a wall around yourself as well, too. Like you have literally built a fortress to protect yourself of stuff, I think of, if you've ever seen Les Miserables, and they built the barricade, right? And it's just a collection of chairs and tables and all sorts of things. Well, hoarding's kind of like that, too. My home is a collection of all of these things, and I kind of live in the middle of it, and I feel protected away from the world. Hoarding can be an excuse to not have people come over to your house. I can't have people come over. I mean, look at my home. It's a mess, right? So I always have an excuse why I go somewhere else, and I don't ever have anyone come home. So this becomes my protected place, my lair, so to speak, where nobody else is going to ever enter, and this is just mine.
Usually, not usually, at times do you see any comorbidity, other types of diagnoses that come along with it?
Yeah, depression can be very high in people as well. Other anxiety disorders are common. As people get older, it's not uncommon to maybe see some beginnings of dementia that are going along as well in this situation.
What does the aftercare recovery look like? I mean, first of all, what's the success rate, and what does an aftercare plan look like? 2 questions.
Yeah. Success can be can be had, but it really depends on the person following through on doing the behavioral work, right? Doing the getting rid of things and stopping the acquiring. So treatment might involve things like, we're going to go out today, it's garbage day, we're going to look at all the things that people are throwing out, and we're not going to get out of the car, and we're not going to pick things up, right? Or it could be, we're going to go to the store today, and wow, what a great sale they had. Look at this item, man, what a bargain that is. Okay, let's walk away from it now, and let's leave it there and not buy it. And teaching people how to do like a no shopping trip, or a no scavenger hunt, those kinds of things. So in some ways, you can't just focus on the home and all the things that are there. You also have to really take a look at all the behaviors people do outside the home that gathers things up and brings things into the home as well, too. And so there's a lot of different approaches to work on. And then once you've kind of tackled some of those things, again, that's maybe where that organizer can come in, or somebody who's at least going to check in. I like, at least for a year, on a weekly basis, to hold the person accountable and to make sure that we don't see little piles starting to grow again, or something like that.
You had mentioned some organizations. Would those be organizations for information, or are there actual support groups for hoarders?
There are some organizations. The International OCD Foundation has a listing of hoarding information. They've got a subset of their website, actually, that is all about hoarding. So it's ocfoundation.org or iocdf.org, and you can go to that website, and you can check out all the hoarding information that they have there. And if you go to OCD Midwest, you can also find some links to the Chicago Land Hoarding Task Force as well.
Excellent. We covered a lot of areas here. I think you gave our listeners a lot more information about hoarding here, and we greatly appreciate it. What additional information do you think there's that you would like to say about hoarding? Anything additional information that would be helpful for us to know about that?
I just say this: it's more common than we think it is, and it can be dangerous, right? When things get taller and taller and piles shift, they can fall, they can hurt people. If you want a very interesting story of hoarding, look up the Collier brothers in New York. They had a 3-story brownstone that was just full of, I think they pulled out about 28 tons of stuff out of the 3-story before they finally got it empty. But one of the brothers was killed in the hoard because he had some booby traps built into it. They were a little bit paranoid and worried that someone was going to break in the home, and he set off one of the booby traps, it appears, and it shifted all sorts of things, and he was crushed, just collapsed under the weight of papers and boxes and books.
Wow. And that would be the Collier brothers? Is it C-O...
Collier, I believe it is.
Okay.
Brothers, and it's in New York. But it's probably the first big hoarding case that ever made media attention. It's a very interesting read.
I appreciate that. Now, Patrick, at the beginning of the interview, you had mentioned, was it 2 books that you wrote?
Yeah, one's called Don't Try Harder, Try Different, and the other is called The OCD Answer.
Excellent. Hey, Patrick, again, this is great information. We greatly appreciate that, and we appreciate your time. Also, if people wanted to know further more about your services or get in contact with you, we'll not only put a link on our website to this podcast, but how would they get in contact with you? Do you have a website they could reach?
Yeah, or you could go to treatmyocd.com. That's for NOCD, or Anxiety Centers of Illinois is another place to reach out. And if anybody's looking for a more intensive type of therapy, you can go to Amita Health, and they are still virtually running the intensive outpatient and the partial hospital programs, and the residential program is still running in person as well too. So though we're in the midst of COVID, we have lots of resources still available for people, and anyone who listens to this across the country knows NOCD has teletherapy currently in 23 different states. So we are available to help people if they need it.
Great. Again, Patrick, we thank you for your time, and it's much appreciated.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you.